the most important thing in a film like The Deer Hunter is that 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 to have within you the history of the character, and not just your own character, but everybody's. It's a town. It's a small town. They grew up with each other. What were the dynamics when they were kids? Who was the leader of the little gang? Who was the athletic one? Who was the one as teenagers that got all the girls, or the girl that got all the guys? Who was the lonely one? Who was the shy one? Who was the smart one that everybody else made fun of because they were too intellectual? Who was the wimp? The one who had no confidence, who lost the fights, and that the others made fun of? Who was all of these things? And you see this in the actors, that there's a whole life story behind them, as relating not only to themselves, but to the community, to the group, and to their specific peers. This is incredibly important. How do you construct that? Do you just think about it a lot and then do it? That only works up to a point, and actually can lead you astray, because most of us, even the best of us, tend to think in cliches. Or because they read a few psychology books, or they're into, Freud or Jung or something. It's not actually human nature. It's trying to get at human nature in a mental, intellectual way, but it's not experiential. The actor is not an intellectual. We use our intellect, absolutely, but that's more to organize the work and to understand, what's really going on. But not to actually experience. To actually experience, you need to be in the moment. You need to feel it in your body. You need to feel it in your bones, in your muscles, in your emotions, in your breathing, in the way your blood flows. In The Deer Hunter, there's a lot of scenes that call for quite a bit of athleticism. Running up hills, certainly in Vietnam on the river, and in some of the battles and so forth. There's a demand on the body. And you see in the actors different levels of dealing with that, of how their bodies react, and how their bodies react to each other. It's very interesting in the film, because in American culture, if you take a group of straight men, no homosexuals, but they're great friends, you don't see a lot of physical contact. It's just American culture. European cultures, you see a lot more, or you used to. In America, it's kind of like, you'll slap the other guy on the shoulder, or you'll slap his butt if it's a football game or whatever, but it's not taken as being gay in any way. It's, you can hug, or you can make fist bumping. There's these rituals that American men do that are allowed to say, I'm straight, but I'm a tiny bit affectionate with my brothers or my friends. Women in America are much more permitted to be demonstrably physical with each other. They though don't go as far as European women, who will walk down the street with their arms around each other. And I've seen European men do the same. Less so these days, but 20 years ago they did it all the time. And it didn't mean they were gay. There was nothing about that. In fact, if you said something as an American, what, are they gay? People would look at you like, what, are you crazy? What's the matter with you? And who cares anyway? But in America, no, men are very careful about that sort of thing in most of the country. In this particular town, industrial town, macho town, they're manly men in this Pennsylvania town. But but from the Russian culture, they get much more physical with each other. There's a way in which, that when they're sitting around talking or bullshitting or having beers, they'll lean on each other. They'll put the arm, they'll lean their whole body on the other guy's body. And it doesn't mean anything other than that they like to do that without it being suspicious of any sexuality in any way. And you see that in this film, and it's so casual the way the actors do it that you kind of don't even notice it so much unless you're looking for it. And yet, what it does subliminally is you see the love between these people. And then you see it played out during scenes of violence in Vietnam, scenes of stress and anxiety, their need to touch each other. And any one character, for instance, Robert De Niro's character, who's emerges as the strong sort of hero in the film, is the one who takes care of the other guys, of Christopher Walken and John Savage, as well as he can, the three guys who went to Vietnam. And the way he touches or is physical with Christopher Walken is quite different than the way he is with John Savage. John Savage's character is a guy who cannot take too much fear and pain before he starts going crazy. Walken is a whole other kind of case because he's extraordinarily affected by these things, but he doesn't show it that much. He's a bit more dependable in terms of being able to operate, to actually take action positively. Whereas Savage, it's like, no, forget it. In fact, at one point during the first Russian roulette sequence, De Niro says to Walken, forget him, forget John Savage's character. He's not going to make it. He can't do it. And and so you notice, if you really look for it, the way De Niro works with Walken physically and works with Savage differently is pretty different. Walken is almost his equal of De Niro's equal in terms of being able to handle himself and take action and so forth, or at least he trusts Walken to be that way. Walken flies off the handle a bit. He gets too angry and too crazy when he gets violent, but nevertheless he does operate, whereas Savage completely can't handle it and freezes or cries or one of these things. You got to be a bit careful when you're playing somebody who's suffering, because a lot of actors love to suffer and love to cry and love to be hugely emotional in that way and fall on the floor in a pool of tears, which is okay. I've done it myself, but don't do it for very long. Get up fighting. You can cry, but fight while you cry. That's very important. If we see that you're struggling, that you're fighting, even though you're crying, then we're on your side. Then you got us hooked, because that's strength and vulnerability simultaneously. That's what makes stars. If you have those two qualities going at the same time, you conquer the world. If you have only one or the other, you can do okay, but you're not going to conquer the world. You need both.